The return of the prodigal daughter. The hum of the electric motor was the only sound disrupting the sleepy afternoon as Maya's polished obsidian sedan glided past the Welcome to Havenwood sign. 10 years. The decade had painted new cracks in the pavement and added a fresh coat of rust to the town's water tower. But the skeletal remains of the old mill still loomed, a familiar silhouette against the bruised sky. A pang, sharp and unexpected, pierced through her carefully constructed indifference. Havenwood, a place she'd sworn she'd only see in her rearview mirror. She bypassed Main Street's meager offerings, her destination etched in her mind. The old Havenwood Community Center, or what was left of it. Weeds clawed at the peeling paint of the double doors, and a broken window pane stared out like a vacant eye. Parking the car, its sleek lines a stark contrast to the decaying building, Maya stepped out. The scent of damp earth and neglect filled her nostrils, a powerful, almost physical memory. Inside, dust motes danced in the sparse shafts of light filtering through grimy windows. The stage, where she'd awkwardly recited Shakespeare at 8, was now a precarious platform of rotting wood. The basketball court, scene of countless scraped knees and whispered secrets, was littered with debris. A phantom echo of laughter, hers and someone else's, resonated in the silence. She ran a hand over a graffiti-scarred wall, a crude heart with initials she no longer recognized. The pragmatic part of her, the tech mogul who built empires from lines of code, saw only potential. The other part, the girl who'd fled, saw only ghosts. "Heard you were back, Maya," a voice rasped. Mrs. Henderson, her hair a startling shade of lavender, peered over her fence as Maya drove away. "And heard you bought the old center. What in tarnation for?" Her tone, a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled judgment, was classic Havenwood. The news, like wildfire through dry grass, scorched the quiet corners of Havenwood. By evening, whispers of Maya Vance's return and her audacious purchase dominated every porch conversation. "The Vance girl? The one who ran off to the city?" muttered old Mr. Finch at the diner, shaking his head. "And she bought that eyesore? What's she planning?" No one knew, but the sudden influx of curiosity, the raised eyebrows and speculative glances, was exactly the kind of friction Maya thrived on. It would make her next move all the more impactful. A ghost from the past. The clatter of porcelain on the cafe's worn wooden counter shattered Maya's concentration on the architectural plans before her. A shiver, not from the autumn chill seeping through the window, traced its way down her spine. It was a familiar, unwelcome sensation, one she hadn't felt in over a decade. She glanced up, her eyes scanning the familiar faces of Riverbend. Then she saw him, Daniel Kim. He stood across the street, partially obscured by the ancient oak tree, but there was no mistaking the sharp cut of his suit, the subtle arrogance in his posture, or the intensity of his gaze fixed directly on her. Her breath hitched. The air in the cafe seemed to thicken, pressing in on her. He looked older, hardened, yet the underlying current of magnetic charm was still undeniably present. A memory, sharp and unbidden, pierced through her carefully constructed defenses. "Meet me by the old mill after dark," Daniel had whispered, his hand brushing hers under the cafeteria table. His eyes, even then, held a dangerous glint that thrilled and terrified her. She'd always gone, drawn to the thrill of their clandestine meetings. Under the cloak of night, away from the watchful eyes of their parents, they were just Maya and Daniel, two teenagers navigating a world that wanted to keep them apart. His fingers, surprisingly gentle, would trace patterns on her arm as they talked for hours. His voice a low rumble against the murmur of the river. Their shared secrets, their dreams of escaping Riverbend, wove an unbreakable bond between them, until the day it shattered. The opulent Kim mansion had never felt more suffocating. Mr. Kim, a man whose presence could curdle milk, had loomed over them, his face a mask of cold fury. "You will end this," he'd stated, his voice devoid of emotion, eyes like chips of ice. "My son has a future. It does not include you, Miss Vance." Daniel had stood silently beside his father, his gaze fixed on the Persian rug, unable to meet hers. The silence that followed was deafening, a death knell to everything they had built. He hadn't fought for her. He hadn't said a word. Now, across the street, Daniel lifted a hand in a small, almost imperceptible wave. The gesture was a casual invitation, a reopening of a door she had slammed shut and bolted shut a lifetime ago. Maya felt a surge of indignation, hot and fierce. He had no right to reappear, to disturb the hard-won peace she had found. She deliberately turned her back, focusing with renewed intensity on her blueprints, her jaw tight. The ghost from her past had finally arrived. Shadows of influence. The persistent rain had been replaced by an even more unwelcome drizzle of bureaucratic red tape. Deliveries of lumber were inexplicably rerouted, crucial plumbing fixtures vanished from manifests, and permits that had been granted seemed to suddenly require additional, vague amendments. Maya, usually so adept at navigating logistical snags, found herself slamming the phone down more often than not. "It's like someone's actively trying to trip us up," she muttered to her foreman, a grizzled veteran named George. He just grunted, wiping grease from his brow. "Heard whispers, miss. Powerful people around here don't like new faces shaking things up." The whispers grew louder, coalescing into hushed warnings from local vendors who suddenly couldn't fulfill orders, or city officials who cited obscure zoning ordinances. "Be careful, Ms. Vance," one hardware store owner cautioned, his eyes darting around his empty aisle. "Some folks have long shadows in this town. Best not to get caught in them." Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the damp construction site. This wasn't just bad luck. It was deliberate. One afternoon, as she reviewed blueprints, a sleek black sedan pulled up, its tinted windows gleaming. The door opened, and out stepped Mr. Kim, immaculate in a charcoal suit, his presence as precise and unyielding as a granite monolith. He offered no greeting, his gaze sweeping over the nascent foundation of her dream. "Ambitious," he stated, his voice a low rumble, devoid of inflection. "This community, it thrives on tradition, on established hierarchies." He paused, turning his cold, intelligent eyes on Maya. "New shoots, if not properly cultivated, can wither, or be removed." The subtle emphasis on the last word was a clear, chilling promise. He offered a ghost of a smile that never reached his eyes, then turned and re-entered his car, leaving Maya feeling exposed, like a lone sapling in a gathering storm. His influence was a suffocating blanket, and she was only just beginning to feel its crushing weight. Unearthing secrets. The digital map on the projector pulsed with an alarming new overlay. Red pins dotted the periphery of the community center, each one marking a recent property acquisition. "It's Kim International, Maya," Liam announced, his voice tight. "They've bought 6 parcels in the last month alone. All residential, all just gone. And one of them," he zoomed in, a red pin blinking ominously, "borders the old community garden." Maya's jaw tightened. She ran a hand through her braids, the metallic scent of old coffee clinging to her fingers. This wasn't coincidence. Later that afternoon, the chime of the center's old bell startled her. Daniel Kim stood in the doorway, framed by the late afternoon sun, casting a long shadow. He looked less polished than usual, his tie slightly askew, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Maya," he began, his voice a low murmur. "We need to talk." She folded her arms, a familiar prickle of distrust rising. "About what, Daniel?" "Another one of your father's philanthropic ventures." The bitterness in her tone was sharp, honed by years. He winced, a subtle tightening around his eyes. "This isn't about that. This is about something else. Something you need to know." He took a step closer, his gaze earnest, almost pleading. "My father, he's making moves, big ones, in this neighborhood." Maya's laugh was harsh, devoid of humor. "I'm well aware of your father's moves, Daniel. They usually involve displacing people and lining his pockets." She gestured vaguely at the map still glowing faintly on the projector screen behind her. "I have a pretty good idea of what he's up to." Daniel's shoulders slumped slightly. It's more complex than you think. He's not just buying properties. He's acquiring land for something much larger. Something that will impact everyone here. He hesitated, glancing around the empty main hall as if afraid of being overheard. There's a development plan. Undisclosed. But it's coming. And he's not going to stop at the residential plots. Her eyes narrowed. The old hurt, the feeling of betrayal, flared within her. And you're just now deciding to warn me? After all this time? What's your angle, Daniel? A sudden pang of conscience? Or is this just another one of your elaborate schemes? She remembered the taste of ashes, the sting of tears from a decade ago. It was a hard lesson, trust. And she wasn't about to forget it for a man who'd proven himself unreliable once before. The web of corruption. The morning air, usually vibrant with the chirping of sparrows, felt heavy, tinged with the metallic tang of fresh spray paint. Maya arrived at the community center site to find a scene of deliberate defacement. The newly erected fence was scarred with crude, threatening symbols, and a bulldozer, left overnight, had a flattened tire, a clear act of sabotage. Her jaw tightened. This wasn't random vandalism. It was a message. A chill snaked down her spine, colder than the morning breeze. That afternoon, barricaded in her makeshift office, Maya plunged into the digital underworld. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, a flurry of precise movements. Hours blurred into a single focused effort, fueled by lukewarm coffee and an unwavering resolve. She dove deep into public records, obscure financial filings, and archived news reports, a digital archaeologist sifting through layers of data. The initial leads were faint, wisps of smoke in a vast digital forest. But Maya was relentless. She remembered a fleeting mention of Mr. Kim's controversial land acquisitions from a local council meeting transcript, a detail most would overlook. It was the thread she needed. Following it, she bypassed firewalls and decrypted layers of obscure protocols. Her screen glowed with lines of code, then images, then finally a series of encrypted files. The lock clicked open with a soft, digital sigh. What she found made her stomach clench. Not only were there detailed schematics for various illicit land deals, systematically stripping vulnerable communities of their property, but also heavily redacted communication logs. One name, though frequently obscured, kept reappearing: the Serpent, cross-referencing it with whispered rumors from her youth. Maya's blood ran cold. The Serpent, a ruthless figure notorious for controlling the city's underbelly, was Mr. Choi, the very man whose son, Juno, had once been a part of her complicated past. The web of corruption was far more intricate and far more personal than she could have ever imagined. Mr. Kim wasn't just a powerful developer. He was a puppet, and the strings led directly to a ghost from her past, now an undeniable threat. A son's betrayal. The clatter of his father's heavy signet ring against the polished mahogany desk echoed through the study, a percussive accompaniment to the rising tide of his anger. Daniel watched from the doorway, a shadow in the opulent gloom. His father, Mr. Kim, was reviewing surveillance footage, his face contorted in a mask of cold fury. Maya's image flickered across the screen, her movements precise, her expression unreadable even under the unflattering infrared. "She's tenacious," Mr. Kim muttered, the compliment laced with venom. "But she'll learn that some battles are unwinnable." He then barked orders into his phone, the words escalate and pressure slicing through the air like icicles. Daniel felt a familiar chill, not from the cold, but from the growing ruthlessness in his father's eyes. This wasn't strategy anymore. It was an obsession. Later that evening, the city lights blurred outside the tinted windows of Daniel's car. He drove to a secluded cafe, its awning casting a pool of muted yellow light onto the deserted street. Maya was already there, a solitary figure nursing a lukewarm coffee. Her guard was up, a palpable barrier around her. "Daniel," she said, her voice flat, devoid of surprise. He slid a slim, encrypted USB drive across the table. Its cold plastic felt heavy in his palm, a tangible weight of his decision. "This is for you." Maya eyed the drive, then him, her gaze sharp and dissecting. "What is it?" "Everything," he replied, his voice barely a whisper. "Financial records, communication logs, security protocols. Proof of every illegal transaction, every manipulated contract, every threat my father has made, every connection he has. Enough to bring him down if you play your cards right." Her eyebrows, usually so controlled, lifted fractionally. She picked up the drive, turning it over in her fingers. The initial shock quickly gave way to a dawning realization, a flicker of something intense in her eyes. The implications of his gift, of his betrayal, settled around them like a thick fog. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel met her gaze, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. "Because he's going too far, Maya. And because he needs to be stopped." He saw the flicker of something akin to understanding in her eyes, a recognition of the difficult path he had just chosen. The coffee in front of her remained untouched. The street outside was silent, but in the small cafe, the world had just irrevocably shifted. The reckoning. The fluorescent hum of the community hall did little to soothe the coiled tension in Maya's gut. Beside her, Daniel adjusted the microphone, his usual assuredness replaced by a subtle tremor in his hand. "Good evening," he began, his voice clear despite the strain. "We're here to present irrefutable evidence of a systematic pattern of corruption." A projector whirred to life, splashing a detailed spreadsheet onto the screen behind them. Maya stepped forward, her voice cutting through the murmuring crowd. "These are the land deals, the inflated invoices, the shell corporations. Each transaction, meticulously documented, points to one individual, Mr. Jae-ho Kim." As she spoke, images flickered. Doctored permits, forged signatures, bank statements revealing illicit transfers. A collective gasp rippled through the packed room. Faces, initially skeptical, contorted into expressions of disbelief and then a slow-burning fury. Daniel took over, outlining the human cost. "These aren't just numbers. These are homes lost, livelihoods destroyed, dreams shattered." He recounted specific instances, his voice resonating with a quiet conviction that silenced the last pockets of chatter. A woman in the third row openly wept. A man stood, shaking a fist, shouting, "We knew it! We knew something wasn't right." The hall erupted, a cacophony of outrage and betrayal. Local council members, initially stony-faced, now looked pale and rattled. Later, as the throng dispersed, a sense of weary victory settled over Maya. Daniel's arm brushed hers, a silent acknowledgement of their shared burden and burgeoning trust. They were halfway out the door when her phone buzzed, a harsh, insistent vibration. The message was simple, stark, and terrifying. A photo of Amani, blindfolded, a single red rose placed delicately on her chest. Below it, one chilling word, retribution. Maya's breath hitched, the triumphant glow of the evening dissolving into a cold dread that clawed at her throat. The rescue and the fall. The scent of stale coffee and fear hung heavy in Daniel's study as they unrolled the blueprints. Maya traced a finger along the ventilation shafts. "He'll have guards at every entrance, but the service tunnels? You said they're mostly forgotten?" Daniel nodded, his eyes scanning the diagram. "Only maintenance staff ever use them, and they're infrequent. We can access the main generator room from there." He pointed to a small, unlabeled room adjacent to the vault. "That's where he keeps the security server. If we cut power to that, the vault doors will cycle open." "Too risky," Maya countered, her brow furrowed. "The backup generators will kick in too quickly. We need a distraction." A glint entered her eyes. "What about the old warehouses on the docks? Your father uses them for unscheduled deliveries, doesn't he?" A flicker of recognition crossed Daniel's face. "He'll have a skeleton crew there, but enough to cause a stir. If we rig a small explosion—" "Not an explosion," Maya interrupted. "Just enough smoke and noise to draw his attention. He's obsessed with his assets. He'll send most of his men to secure the docks. The plan solidified. Daniel, cloaked in the shadows of his own compound, would trigger the diversion. Maya, meanwhile, would slip into the service tunnels, navigating the labyrinthine passages with a precision born of necessity. She moved like a phantom, her footsteps silent on the damp concrete. The air grew thick with the metallic tang of old machinery. Reaching the generator room, she disabled the security server with swift, practiced movements. The hum of the vault doors echoed through the silent building. Outside, the docks erupted in a cacophony of alarms and shouting. Mr. Kim, red-faced and bellowing orders, was already there, his focus entirely on the perceived threat to his illicit cargo. It was then that the city police, alerted by an anonymous tip, a call from a burner phone Daniel had left in a public waste bin, swarmed the docks. The sudden appearance of flashing lights and blaring sirens caught Mr. Kim entirely off guard. He stumbled back, his eyes wide with a dawning horror as he watched his empire crumble around him. Daniel stood on a nearby rooftop, a silent observer, the weight of his father's downfall a heavy burden, yet also a strange, quiet release. The sirens grew louder, converging on the dockside, a symphony of justice for the long-suffering city, building anew. The scent of freshly baked bread mingled with the buzz of excited chatter as the community center's grand opening unfolded. Sunlight streamed through the repurposed warehouse windows, illuminating the vibrant murals painted by local artists and the earnest faces of the neighborhood residents. Maya, a faint sheen of perspiration on her brow, moved through the throng, a genuine smile gracing her lips as she accepted congratulations. Her vision, once a fragile whisper, now stood solid and vibrant. Daniel, surprisingly, was not far behind her. He'd foregone his usual tailored suits for a simple, comfortable shirt. His sleeves rolled to reveal forearms still bearing faint marks from helping install the new plumbing. He spoke with an older woman, his voice low and respectful, explaining the new computer literacy program. He caught Maya's eye across the room, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze before he offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. He'd chosen to stay, to lend his sharp mind and an unexpected aptitude for practical work to her cause. His father's shadow, once a suffocating weight, had finally lifted. Weeks turned into months. Daniel became an indispensable fixture, organizing supply runs, drafting proposals for funding, and even leading a youth mentorship program. He never overstepped, never presumed. He simply worked, his dedication a quiet testament to his remorse and his burgeoning desire to make amends. Maya, though still guarded, found herself relying on him, appreciating his keen insights and his unflappable demeanor under pressure. The community center, now christened the Beacon, flourished, offering everything from free health clinics to after-school tutoring. One evening, after the last volunteer had left and the hum of activity had died down, Maya found Daniel meticulously stacking donated books in the new library. The only sound was the gentle rustle of pages. "You know," she said, leaning against the doorframe, "you didn't have to stay." He paused, a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird in his hand. "Didn't I?" He turned, his eyes meeting hers, a rare vulnerability in their depths. "I made a mess, Maya, a monumental one. This feels like the only way to begin cleaning it up." Maya's gaze softened. The bitterness that had once defined their interactions had faded, replaced by a cautious respect, a fragile understanding. She walked over, taking a book from his hand and placing it on a shelf. "It's a good start," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. The air between them, once thick with unspoken accusations, now hummed with a different kind of tension, a hopeful, tentative anticipation of what might finally be built anew.